If you've ever gone through the process of looking for a new church home, then you might know how it feels to be on the receiving end of a high-pressure sales pitch. I confess that sometimes when I meet people who are new to the church, maybe looking for a new place to call home, I am tempted to tell them about all of the good things that there are to know about Methodism and about Court Street United Methodist Church. And there are so many good things that we could share. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, was one of the most remarkable followers of Jesus who ever lived. Court Street United Methodist Church has a long and distinguished history. We stand on the shoulders of circuit riders and abolitionists and people who did good for Jesus in this place. It would be so easy to fill up our website with video after video telling you about all of the good in the United Methodist Church and at Court Street United Methodist Church in particular. The problem with the sales pitch, of course, is that eventually, someday, you're going to hear the rest of the story. You're going to find out that there are parts of our story and parts of our history that are uncomfortable and difficult to tell and difficult to hear. I don't want you to feel like you were deceived. I don't want you to feel like anybody sold you a bill of goods when you came to Court Street United Methodist Church. And so in this video, we're going to talk about some of those uncomfortable parts of our United Methodist story. And we're going to talk about how we at Court Street United Methodist Church are working to do better. It's fair to say that the United Methodist Church has a long history of racial discrimination. John Wesley, one of the founders of the Methodist movement, was an ardent abolitionist. He saw firsthand the horrors of the slave trade when he was a missionary in the English colony of Georgia. He helped to build the movement that eventually led to the end of the British slave trade. In the early days of Methodism in America, Methodist churches had a rule against owning enslaved people. But that rule didn't last very long. As Methodism spread, and especially as it spread to the American South, Methodists relaxed their rules against owning slaves. And as the United States crept towards a civil war in the early 1800s, the church that at that time was known as the Methodist Episcopal Church actually prohibited preachers from talking about abolition in an effort to hold the church together. Methodists who were frustrated by that gag rule left and started new denominations like the Free Methodist Church and the Wesleyan Church. Well, that gag rule and those efforts to hold the church together didn't succeed. The Methodist Episcopal Church did eventually split into a northern church and a southern church. Those churches would not be reunited until 1939. And even then, they were only able to come together because of an act of further racial injustice. One condition of the churches coming back together was that the church would be segregated. The church bowed to pressure from white Methodists who didn't want to be served by black pastors or black bishops. The solution, people believed, was to create a separate branch of the church for African American bishops, clergy, and congregations. Already by this point in history, many black Methodists had left because of ongoing discrimination to start new denominations like the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That formal segregation would last until the United Methodist Church was formed in 1968. Another painful chapter in the United Methodist story has to do with the long and hurtful conflict over the inclusion of LGBTQ people in the life of the church. In 1972, not long after the formation of the United Methodist Church, it was clear that there was a deep division within the church over human sexuality. Some people believed that the church should lead the way in including people who had been harmed and excluded and discriminated against. Others believed that condoning same-sex relationships was a violation of church tradition and biblical teaching. The church decided to prohibit clergy from being part of a same-sex relationship or presiding over same-sex weddings. While those rules are still officially the law of the church, in practice, the United Methodist Church is increasingly fractured, with many congregations choosing to host weddings, many clergy choosing to preside over those weddings, and many bishops losing interest in punishing pastors for following their conscience and breaking those rules. In recent years, Michigan United Methodists have moved more and more in the direction of full inclusion, but LGBTQ inclusion is still an unresolved tension within the United Methodist Church. At Court Street United Methodist Church, we acknowledge these painful parts of our story so we can find repentance and healing from them. We acknowledge that as a mostly white church in a mostly black city, we have an awful lot of learning to do. We spend time listening to black voices and LGBTQ voices. We don't shy away from talking about racial justice and LGBTQ inclusion in our worship and in our study. At Court Street United Methodist Church, you won't find a perfect church and you won't find any perfect people. What you will find is people who are honest about the ways in which we fall short, and grace for those moments when you do too.